The question was about how vulnerable are victims of domestic violence to deportation. And unfortunately, it's a great question because they are very vulnerable. And it's not just in New York, but all across the country. Oftentimes, law enforcement officers will go to the scene of a domestic violence call, and they bring both parties in, they arrest both parties, and they figure it out once they get to the precinct and decide who's going to press charges against who, who's going to take the rep for this situation. What happens is as soon as folks are taken into the precinct, if you're a jurisdiction that has secure communities now, the program that Lili was talking about, both parties are fingerprinted. So even if, say, the woman was the victim in the situation, now she's fingerprinted, she's the victim, she did nothing wrong. But those fingerprints have already been sent to ICE, and now ICE might decide that they want to put her into deportation proceedings. This has been a huge problem with secure communities and has been one of the major points that advocates like us have raised throughout this fight against this program. Similarly, we also have something that Lili briefly touched upon called the Criminal Alien Program, and that is the same kind of notification of an immigrant to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It just happens at a different time. It happens instead of the point of fingerprints, it happens when someone is booked into a jail. So if both parties are, for some reason are both booked into the jail and both have charges, then again, that victim will be made known to ICE and made put into deportation proceedings. So that's very much a problem. And if you work with domestic violence, victims of domestic violence, that's something that the group really needs to be educated about. Here in New York City, as Detective Diaz mentioned, we do have Executive Order 41. It should never be a question, as to what your immigration status is. The NYPD brings you one of those domestic violence charges. Because New York City doesn't have secure communities, hopefully that isn't happening too much here in the city of New York, but it is something that you want to educate your communities about.
We're going to start with our first presentation, which is on secure communities by Lili Salmeron from the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And then that will be followed by a question and answer period.
Thank you all for being here. So Secure Communities is a program that ICE Immigration uses to deport non-citizens. So we are in this moment right now where there is increasing collaboration between the police and immigration agents. And in my discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to this point, why there has been this massive increase in deportations in our recent history, how these programs work, and then also talk about the campaign to stop secure communities in New York State. So first, who's at risk? Who can be deported? And any non-citizen in the United States can be at risk for deportation. So that means that someone who has a green card but has past criminal convictions may be at risk. And if someone is undocumented, they're at risk too. And you're undocumented not only if you cross the border without papers, but also if your status or your visa expired or you've been deported in the past. So that very generally are the categories of immigrants that are at risk for deportation. So as I mentioned, and as you probably all know, there has been this massive increase in deportations recently. And just to give you a couple of statistics that speaks to that, from 1892 to 2000, the US government deported 2.6 million people. But from 2001 to 2010, the government deported 2.8 million people. So that is more than what the government has deported in the past more than 100 years. So that's really dramatic. So what led to this increase? Why are we seeing this right now? And throughout American history, there have always been groups of people and communities that the government has claimed are threats to public safety and do not deserve full citizenship. And we probably all have histories in our minds of the African slaves, the indigenous communities, the Japanese during World War II. And over time, the targets change and the terms change, but it always remains that generally the non-white, low-income immigrant communities that are targeted in this way. And right now we are in the era where the targets, the so-called targets, are illegal criminal aliens. And in talking about communities or about people in that way, that is the sort of language that the government uses to get a lot of funding and support for these deportation programs. And just very quickly, a really big reason why we're seeing this increase in deportations is due to changes in the laws in 1996, where Congress passed a law that narrowed people's ability to see a judge in their immigration case and to argue in front of a judge and say, look, I deserve to stay here because I work really hard and I have US citizen kids. After that law, a lot of folks lost that opportunity to go in front of a judge. The law also expanded the list of convictions that triggered deportation. And so what this amounts to is an incredibly unjust immigration system. And I'm sure either you or people you love have had experiences with immigration where if you have a deportation order, you do not get a government-appointed attorney. So for folks who are low income, it can become really difficult to afford a lawyer, and you need a lawyer because the system is so complex. A lot of folks are subject to mandatory detention. What does this mean? This means they have to fight their case while being detained in what is a prison, even though the government claims it's not, you're not in criminal custody, but you are being imprisoned. And a lot of people are sent to centers that are really far away, in Louisiana, in Texas, in Alabama. And being so far away from their community and their homes makes it really hard for them to get the documents that they need to fight their case, to get access to free legal services that they might have in larger cities like New York. So this amounts to just a lack of due process, a lot of folks not having what we call their fair day in court. And then unfortunately, on top of this, the government is trying to increase the collaboration between the police and the criminal justice system and immigration. And that is where a program like Secure Communities comes in. So just to be clear, Secure Communities is not activated in New York City, though it is activated in counties around the city, in Putnam, and Rockland, Westchester, and in Long Island. But what Secure Communities is a program that allows the police to automatically send the fingerprints of everyone who is arrested to ICE databases so that they can check that person's immigration history. This basically allows immigration to have a presence in every precinct, so that even if charges are eventually dropped, once that information is sent on to ICE, and ICE knows that someone can be deported, they are then at risk of being detained by immigration. We don't have Secure Communities in New York City, but we have this other program that you may have heard of. It's called the Criminal Alien Program, and it's basically ICE at Rikers, where ICE is permanently stationed at Rikers, and they will interview people who are coming in to see if they're deportable, or if for some reason there's a flag in the system. And no matter if they determine that someone can be deported, no matter how their criminal case might turn out, that person might get placed in immigration custody. And we have ICE immigration in all the prisons in New York State and in Rikers. So what's wrong with these programs? Well, obviously they funnel people into an immigration system that is broken, that is just inherently unfair. But these programs also they encourage racial profiling. And I'm sure Andrea can speak to that a little bit more. And we've seen instances of that where Secure Communities has been activated. Also, it undermines community safety because if people think that talking to the police might lead to them or their loved one being detained by immigration, they're then more scared of calling the police when they need to. And so this really goes against the idea of community policing, of communities working with police to keep our community safe. Also, having what is called an immigration detainer against you, where ICE has told Rikers that they want to pick you up, sometimes limits the sort of sentences or programs that you might plead to within your criminal case. So it fosters bias against immigrants within the criminal justice system, which is unfair for folks who, because they're not citizens, to confront a much more difficult situation. So now I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the Secure Communities campaign. So under Governor Patterson, his administration signed an agreement with ICE authorizing them to implement this program in counties across New York State. And community-based organizations across the state got together to fight this because we said, well, this is deeply unfair. And we created an incredibly diverse coalition that wasn't just immigrant rights organizations, but it was labor organizations, it was churches and mosques and synagogues, domestic violence victims organizations, LGBTQ organizations. They were all represented in this diverse coalition that said that we don't want immigration in our communities because it makes us more unsafe. And after about a year and a half, we were able to, we won a victory where Governor Cuomo said that he would halt the implementation of this program. Unfortunately, it remains activated where it has already been activated, so we still have it in Long Island, and we have it in Westchester, and Rockland, and Putnam, but it is not in New York City, and it was a major victory to have a governor say to ICE that no, we don't want this program here. It goes against our values as a state and our ideas of fairness. And a big part of this effort was Senator Serrano. He led a group of 50 state legislators who signed on to a letter that they sent to Governor Cuomo explaining why this program was wrong and it was wrong for our communities. And what was also really beautiful about the victory was that we were able to have Governor Cuomo halt the implementation under the idea that we should be protecting the rights of all immigrants. That we don't just want that even people who go through the criminal justice system still deserve due process in the immigration system, and that their rights should also be protected. Now this fight has gone onto the national level because ultimately the Obama administration has said that they want this program everywhere in the country by 2013. So we are fighting nationwide with organizations across the country to convince the administration to put a moratorium on this program and to stop its implementation. And this is also part of the broader fight for truly just immigration reform, where we want to see a path for legalization and an immigration system where people have due process, but not at the expense of our community members who may have gone through the criminal justice system, because we believe that due process, everyone deserves due process.